Good morning guys, and welcome back. The previous talk that I did was on team patrol formations, and I said that the next thing I was going to do was actually looking at the position of a team leader within a team on patrol. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about that today, and I'm going to look at 4-man and a little bit at 6-man teams. So just to set the kind of conditions for this is we are not going to look at a squad leader level. A squad leader, which I'll touch upon at some point in the future, is going to be a guy that is in charge of 2 or perhaps 3 teams. You could have a 9-man squad, 2 4-man teams and a squad leader, or perhaps you could have a 13-man squad with 3 4-man teams and a squad leader. And that's a different kind of thing because he's going to have to decide where he's going to be. Whereas a team leader, he's going to be within the team, and although the team leader is within that team, that 4-man or 6-man team, he's going to be integral to that team, but he has to decide where he's best to position himself and I'm really talking about as he moves on patrol, and I'm going to kind of go a little bit into what happens if you come under contact as I go through this. So a team of 4, that doesn't really want to be split too many different places. That wants to remain together, and so those teams of 4 are your kind of building block of a squad. And so yes, it's okay to move a team away from a team within a squad, but you don't want to be splitting up a 4-man team as much as possible. So what I got today is I got the model guys out again, and so slightly different color camouflage. This guy here is going to be my team leader, and this is going to be the 4-man team. So let's just look at if we're moving, and you might want to watch the previous video on this where I talk about different patrol formations, but let's say we're on a movement, and we can be on a movement, and let's say for example we're going to go, and I'm going to go through and kind of like an order of different positions and the pros and cons of the different positions. So let's say now we are heading in that direction, and we can either be in single file like we are right now, or we can be in file or column. Both very similar formations, which are just going to depend on the terrain that we're in. So, number 1 guy. Why would we put the team leader number 1, and is that a good position for him to be in? So if we're on patrol, and let's say I just put it in single file again. So now we're on patrol, and this position here is the point man position. So that in itself has a lot of responsibility and isn't necessarily the position that you want the overall team leader to be in. The team leader might be thinking about other stuff, like what he's going to do at the ORP in 10 kilometers, etc. The point man should be focused on what he's doing as the point man. And in reality also, he is the most likely guy to get hit in a surprise contact, assuming the contact comes from the front. If it comes from the side, anybody's guess. But he's the point guy, he's responsible for selecting the route, etc. And then classically the second guy may also be what you might call the slack man, and he's backing up the point man. And of course this could be bigger than a team, it could be a 6-man or a 4-man or a squad element. Okay, so why would you put the guy number 1? Actually, this is something that, like on my very first deployment, I found myself moving from the position where we were told to be, which was like number 2, and part of the reason for that is as a team leader to the military, you have more worth than because you're the team leader, and therefore they don't want you to be the first one that dies. Okay, I didn't mean that in a an unegalitarian state, but in a military sense, they don't want you to be the number 1 guy. I discovered, and this was within a satellite patrolling situation where I was actually in charge of a 12-man element, but we were split down into 3 4-man teams for satellite patrolling, and so this was the primary team, and I was leading that team physically whilst the other 2 teams sort of satellited around. And I discovered that I had a young element, and I became, in my youthful exuberance, I became frustrated with the ability to explain to my point guy, who wasn't very experienced, as to where I wanted to go. I was somewhat unusual in that, and you can all laugh at this, but I could actually map read, and I was actually pretty good at it. So I ended up moving to the point position. So that is a reason, I use that as a personal example. That is a reason, because if you are leading people who are less experienced and you haven't got that reliable guy, etc., and for whatever reason, or you're just a dick and you want to be at the front, okay, so then you can take this position, okay. Obviously, well, depending on what environment you're in, if it's an environment with IEDs, that kind of situation, then you're more at risk personally. But then again, you can turn around and say, well, that's a function of leadership. I don't want to get into that too much, because it's not actually the function of the leader to specifically be at the front in formations. Especially when you get to squad leader level, you need to be at a place where you can actually control things better. And I'll touch on that a little bit more, even at a team level. So that is not an ideal position to be in for that reason. However, one of the reasons you might be in that position, and one of the reasons you might come from a position further back down the line, even at platoon level or whatever, you're the platoon leader, you're in charge of a half platoon, multiple, or a satellite team, and a satellite patrol, and you might have everybody together and you might move to the front. And the situation where you might do that, or even when you're on a reconnaissance patrol of just 4 men or 6 men, you might have moved through a series on your patrol, through a series of rally points, and then you are moving to your ORP, your objective rally point, and you may be wanting to have more input on the selection of that ORP. Also, you might be conducting a leader's reconnaissance. Also, you may be moving people into where you're going to establish your observation post. You may be moving into where you are establishing an ambush. So in those situations, usually it's usual for the leader to come to the front like this, and then he can then lead people in. And that's getting into sort of larger operations than just moving. But there are specific reasons for a leader to go to the front. But I would say that it's not ideal for a leader to be at the front the whole time whilst you're patrolling, for the reasons that I've given. Also, if we were to be contacted from the front, then we, not only is the point guy the most likely guy at that time to get hit, but I mean, depending where your other elements go. So let's say your second guy comes up level with you like this, and then the third elements decide to go. If they went to the right, you'd be central to the formation, best place to control it from. If they went to the left, you'd be on the end of the formation. It's something to consider. It's harder, therefore, to control at that point. If we had a contact right or left, so let's say we have a contact from the camera, and we all turn onto it, then you're at the end of the formation. It doesn't mean that if we're peeling out left or right, it doesn't mean that you can't then reposition yourself. So it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely something to consider. Okay, so a few points on position front. Okay, let's put him number 2. This might be kind of like a classic idea of where to put the guy in a 4-man team. We might put him number 2. So he's not the point guy. So now you've got the point guy able to fully focus on what he's doing, and then he's doing some kind of navigation. He's going where you've told him to go. You're doing the main navigation. Okay, he's moving on legs and stopping when he gets to where you told him to go. You're moving up to him, directing him where to go next. You're not, however, a proper slack man on him, because you're the leader and you're thinking about all that other stuff, whether you filled in the right paperwork, etc. Okay, what's going to happen at the ORP? I just, throw a few things out there. So, that's okay, however, because you're slightly back, and then you've got a bit more of a, if something goes down, you've got a bit more of a situational awareness of what's going on. If you have a contact left or right and you turn, you're more central to the formation. Okay, if you get a contact front and you deploy up on line with him, then again, depending where these guys go, if they go up there, then you're again on the end of the formation. If they come over here, you're central to the formation. So number 2 is not a bad spot to be in, but you kind of have, I would suggest it's good as a general position to be in for moving, because you're now in alpha, okay, and you've got Bravo here, and therefore you're directing the point guy. But it's not necessarily good for when you get a contact. And what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about unexpected contact. So as you're moving on patrol, you get a contact. It's not ideal for that because you're locked in with Alpha, and Alpha's job is to react initially as Bravo's moving up to wherever they need to go, and so you're locked into that. And so just a little bit on that. If you're a shooter within the patrol, okay, you are one of the troopers in the patrol, then should we come under contact, you are interested in executing your drills and getting rounds on the enemy. You are trying to win the firefight and regain the initiative from the enemy. Again, I'm talking about a surprise contact whilst you are moving. If this happens, then that's what you're doing. You're locating the enemy, communicating that to the rest of the team, getting rounds on the enemy and trying to suppress the enemy. The leader is not primarily occupied in that. Caveat, of course, if you're only a 4-man team, maybe you take a casualty, then it's all coming down to a lower level and he might have no choice. But the leader's only going to be shooting when he needs to shoot. If he doesn't need to shoot, he can direct, he can look around. Everyone's going to be focused on whatever identified firing point it is. Obviously everybody should be not sucked into their sights. Everybody should be shooting and observing, keeping situational awareness, depending on the experience of your team. At least the leader is going to have the ability to look around and think about what the next step is, how we're going to get out of this situation, okay? So you don't want him to be just locked in as a shooter. You want him to have the ability to think, okay, and execute his job as a leader. All right, so there's a few points on that. So what about if we take him out of number 2? Now, okay, spoiler, I think number 3 is the best position, right? But let's put him number 4. Why would we put him number 4? One thing about being number 4, now, if we were a 6-man patrol, different idea, right? But number 4 in a 4-man patrol. What's good about this position is he gets to see everything that's going on in front of him. As long as you've got reliable people to lead the patrol, nav and lead the patrol, make decent decisions about how to move through the ground, etc., then he can see everything that's going on. And that's quite a good position for him to be in. The problem is that one of the responsibilities of the 4th guy in a 4-man patrol is to cover the rear. So he's kind of, yeah, he's covering the rear. The other thing is, depending what unit we're talking about here, if this is an army formation or whatever, then he might actually be the saw gunner, okay? And it's always good to keep the saw gunner at the rear because that's a better position once the crap goes down. Hopefully he's a little bit further back, so you've got the option to deploy him to the best position to influence the battle. So not necessarily ideal to be in the 4th position. Right, so let's put him number 3. What's great about number 3? All right, so number 3. If you're number 3, you got to trust number 1 and number 2 to do what they're supposed to be doing. But that does give you the ability to have a proper point guy, a slack man who's backing him up. Those guys are alpha. You're then in Bravo. If you're in Bravo, then what happens is, if you get a contact right or left, then everybody turns and you're central to the formation. If you get a contact to the front, then Alpha's going to do what Alpha's going to do. What this gives you the ability, and again, like I mentioned, if this guy does have a squad automatic weapon, is you then have the ability, you're a little bit back, obviously you're not just standing there, you're taking cover, but you're a little bit back, you get to see what's going on, you get to see how these guys are oriented, what's going on, and then that gives you the ability to make the decision as to whether you're going to go to the right, whether you're going to go to the left, maybe you need to get the saw gunner out here, whatever it is. And then when you do that, if I go to the right, then I can send this guy, the fourth guy, around me. Now I'm central to the formation. If I come to the left, again, he goes around me and I'm central to the formation. So that's a pretty good situation for when you come under contact. But where this doesn't work is where you haven't got an alpha pair who you can actually trust to conduct the patrol movement, with you hanging back here thinking about team leader stuff. All right. Now, if we were to make a 6-man team, make sure everything's on camera. This guy doesn't have a weapon. He's obviously not failed his safety, so they haven't given him a weapon yet. All right, so here it is now. So given what I just said about the 4-man team, what you can do, and there's a couple of things here, is depending how you're splitting down your 6-man team. So if you are splitting it down a 3-man alpha element and a 3-man bravo element, then maybe he doesn't want to be number 3, because what he can do is he can be number 4, and then alpha's doing what alpha does, and then bravo, again, like I just said, you're still central for a contact left or right, but then he can move bravo as he wants to move bravo, depending on the situation. He's a little bit further back, and he gets a bit of more of an idea of what's going on. Number 1 guy, number 2 guy here are fighting for their lives at this point. Okay, he might have a little bit more space to figure out what's going on. Also, are there multiple firing points, that kind of stuff? Okay, what's the complexity of the situation? If you're breaking it down into 2-man elements, then what you could do is you could have your alpha element, your bravo element, and then you can have your command element. Okay, and if you were to do this, then again, contact left or right, it is what it is. Contact front, then bravo does what bravo does. These guys can decide where they want to move, and then they can decide where they want to deploy bravo. Okay, so you know, hey, don't take the exact positions of this as tactical. Just trying to show you generally what's going on here. All right, so that's something to think about. Do you want to be 3-man elements, or do you want to be 2-man elements? Also, one thing that's worth considering is if you've got, this could also be something that happens if you're a squad leader that joins in with a team for whatever reason, or you've got a 5-man element. Again, in this situation, he's in the middle. That allows alpha to do what alpha does, following their SOPs as a reactor contact, and then he can deploy bravo to wherever he wants bravo. Now, yesterday I also talked about positions for more advancing to contact, and so if I do it facing the camera right now, what we can do is if we're on a skirmish line like this, then clearly it makes sense that, so previously I was talking about just movement, all right, not expecting contact, but just creating security as we move. Now he's in the center of an extended line, skirmish line. He can even be a little bit to the rear if he wants to be, so he can see what's going on. This allows him to direct, and you'll see this in some of the videos I've done, even like the latest Texas training video I've got up. I've got a guy being the 5th guy, the team leader, in the middle. So he's not in alpha, he's not in bravo, and he's coordinating alpha and bravo. That's pretty useful, especially if people get sucked in and they start to lose situational awareness. One team's going faster than the other, one team's having an issue. He can hold a team while the other team gets itself squared away, and he's got better control over what's going on. One thing we did in one of the scenarios, we had like a little Rhodesia scenario, and it was like it wasn't really a tracking scenario, but what we did was we moved in the arrowhead that I talked about yesterday. And the way I had that happening was I had the arrowhead and I had the team leader, kind of back and central to it. So when the contact started, these guys were immediately deployed. These guys moved up online, and we had Alpha and Bravo, and he just moved to a position where he could assess and coordinate, and then he controlled the pairs moving forwards. One thing you need to be careful of, however you put yourself as a team or squad leader, is you don't want to be somewhere where you're completely on your own, not only because if you're moving around on your own, then you're more vulnerable. Hey, it's always a good idea if you can have a buddy, like a bodyguard that's going to go with you, okay, if you can get that number of people. But the other thing is, even in a formation, so, I mean, you could, if you see these guys coming up, you might guess that's either someone valuable, that might be a tracker in a tracking formation, or that might actually be the team leader. Okay. Similarly, if you come into half attack, as I talked about yesterday, and you decide to be in the middle here, you might be a little obvious. You might want to throw yourself kind of into one of the lines so that it's not quite so obvious who's who. Something to think about. Okay. It still doesn't mean you can't move as you need to, and then these guys can come out to arrowhead. You could, if you wanted to, you could even throw yourself into the line, especially if you thought there was a direction that was more likely enemy threat. Okay, and then if you come up to extended line for a skirmish line, then you can move up like this. Okay, but in reality, that's something that's always often forgotten by leaders, is the personal risk they take, which is why there's a higher attrition rate amongst leaders. Even if you're the guy that's standing up to do all the yelling, or the guy that's doing a lot of hand signals that are obvious, then that if there's an observing enemy, they can pick that out. So it's just something that you need to consider in terms of your personal positions of cover. What you tend to find is that leaders often, especially inexperienced leaders, will forget to take proper cover, especially because in their desire to observe the situation to make decisions. Definitely something to consider. So just to take that up a notch then, so this is kind of a useful thing for a team or a 5-man team, which is kind of useful with the commander outside of that. If you had a 6-man team, what you can do is, alright, you can, oh, he's fallen down, casualty, snipers. Okay, so what you can do is if you had a 6-man team, you could turn that into 2 3-man elements, and you could be part of one of the elements. And then you're moving Alpha, Bravo. Another way to do that, and depending on if you've got any kind of specialist personnel, is you could do a similar thing to what you just did, or you could have Alpha, Bravo, and then command element. If you were to do that, you've got some flexibility here, and so what you've got is you could even pull this guy out of the line if you wanted to. Okay, so you've got Alpha and Bravo, and you're fighting Alpha and Bravo, and then who is this guy? This guy may be somebody, he may be a specialist, he could even be a medic, that he could be bodyguarding you, he could be a guy that's giving more attention to what's going on around the situation whilst you fight the battle. He could even be used as a battle casualty replacement. If one of these guys goes down, he kind of goes into the line. So it's something you can think about rather than just being a 3-man Alpha and a 3-man Bravo. You can have an Alpha, a Bravo, and then a sort of a Charlie command element, and then this guy might be some kind of specialist, okay, who's helping you, or he's some kind of medic, or whatever's going to happen here. One thing that is worth mentioning is that if you're on an assault and maybe one of these guys does go down, okay, then generally, then what you can do is you can actually just jump in, and now you can fight it as Alpha, and you can jump in with him as Bravo. Again, it's just something to consider. Okay guys, kind of a quick run through. There's actually a lot more to this in terms of, you know, the roles and responsibilities of a leader, even at team level. Getting up to squad level, it's even more complicated. What you're trying to balance here is being at the front leading versus being back which might give you better situational awareness and in a better position to make decisions once it all starts to fall apart. Ideally, you don't want to be at the front or near the front. And sometimes this causes confusion with the whole, but haven't I got to lead from the front? But you've got to understand that you don't necessarily have to lead from the front. So you may decide to go to the front because you are specifically moving into, for example, an ambush, and you need to be the guy at the front who reconnoiters the ambush site and who just puts people down in their positions. That's one thing. But moving all the way on the patrol up to the ORP, you don't want to be the guy at the front. It's important to understand that you should have the credibility as a leader that you don't have to be at the front of the patrol to prove that you're at the front of the patrol. You should have enough credibility as a leader so everyone knows your capabilities, everyone's trained with you, everyone knows that, okay? And it shouldn't be a sort of a question of like personal courage, that kind of thing. Or competency. If you're further back, central to the formation, then you're in a better position to understand what's going on, situational awareness, and to fight the battle, to fight your guys through the battle. Times when you may have to go to the front, other than when you're doing a specific move in, like I discussed with an ambush or whatever it is, looking for an ORP, leaders reconnaissance, whatever it might be, is if it starts to go badly wrong. If it starts to go badly wrong, then that's the kind of situation where you're going to have to, you might have to give up on the sort of the best position to be in order to display personal courage to lead the guys through whatever the situation is, etc. So these are all things to consider. There's probably a lot of thoughts on there, guys. This is the second video I've done with the toy soldiers. It seems to be sort of working as a good visual. I may get more whatever the word is. I may get more advanced on this, and I may even create a kind of sand table situation where I can actually show maneuvers and stuff, and we'll see how that goes. And please give me feedback and comments if you think it's something worthwhile. I mean, I could show like a squad hasty attack, or I could show break contact drills using a kind of a hybrid, not proper stop motion, but like kind of like film it and cut it. So let me know, and let me know if this is useful to you. Thanks very much.